Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on building chatbots. It's basically a developer's guide, and my name is Sebastian Talet, and my colleague Jonathan Pereira will take you through basically how to build a chatbot, and it should be a fun session. So while we're waiting for more people to join, I'm gonna take you through some standard stuff. So in case you have any problems with the audio, you can't hear me very well, or you can't hear me at all. Well, if you can't hear me at all, you probably can't hear what I'm just about to say. But it is advised that you connect directly with your computer audio. If you're dialing in with a phone, that doesn't always work quite well. So definitely should try use directly with the computer audio. And if that doesn't help, just restart GoToWebinar, and that usually does the trick. We are also recording this session, so in case you want to rewatch any parts in the future, or if you would want to share this session with somebody else, we will be sharing a recording or a link to YouTube with basically everything that we'll be showing today. And yeah, so quickly about me, my name is Sebastian Vitalets. I'm a senior developer advocate at Progress. I've been involved with NativeChat since pretty much the really early days. So you can follow me on Twitter at Sebawita. So if you have any questions, feel free to fire up some questions over Twitter, or actually I would recommend you to ask questions in here in like GoToWebinar, because later on during the live coding session, we will try to tailor it and maybe show some of the stuff based on some of the requests or questions that you may have. We'll see how that goes. Okay, so the agenda for today, so this is meant to be a fun session. So we'll cover things like, what do chatbots eat? Do chatbots have dreams? I'm gonna tell you why I think you might want a chatbot. We'll go over some of the usual chatbot challenges that I experienced when playing with chatbots from other like actually published chatbots that are out there. And then we'll do an actually live coding segment, which is going to be the main part of this webinar. Okay, so let's start with the fun question that every 6-year-old might ask: what do chatbots eat? And since chatbots are built by developers, in my opinion, the answer is pretty straightforward. And chatbots, they love to eat pizza. It's basically, it is what it is, right? Like, and basically they can accompany all developers in the act of eating. Another one is around whether chatbots have dreams. And if any of you is a fan of Blade Runner, then you will know that in fact they do have dreams, and they dream of electric sheep. But now let's go into slightly more serious part and kind of like think of like, why do we even need chatbots, and what actually changed that chatbots is something that businesses or various organizations should have. It's not just because they exist, but there's actually a real meaning behind them. And in my opinion, a big part of it is based on the fact that our communication patterns have changed. So we used to talk to each other a lot more. We would call each other or go and meet face to face. While this pattern has changed lately, and there is a lot more texting going on, it turns out that we are a lot more comfortable with texting each other and getting information and then communicating in general. And I've been in situations where I'll be at the same table having dinner, and then somebody sitting like 2 chairs away would actually be WhatsApping me during the dinner, which is kind of funny, but this is where we are. And obviously, chatbots come with their own benefits. Besides just that, they can provide you an improved customer service, because you know, they're always there, they're available, which is really cool, and they can be trained to handle many things. They can reduce many common reception call center pain points. Well, one of the things is that they can run 24/7, so they're always available, and they can scale really easily. So it's not only that they're always available, but they can even handle many customers or many users at the same time. They're also really good at handling repetitive tasks. So if you train a chatbot to kind of like answer the same question, the chatbot won't mind if another user asks the same question like 1 million times, because that's what they're basically designed to do. they're really good at handling the same thing over and over again. They never get bored, and also more importantly, they always provide the same and consistent answers. So it is basically guaranteed that if you have 10 users asking the same question, they'll always get the same accurate answer, which also builds up trust, which is a really good thing. And there's also another case for chatbots where the speed of communication with chatbots is really great, because once the chatbot is trained to handle a specific conversation, it can really quickly move from one step to another. And moreover, it can get direct access to your data. So you could integrate your chatbots with 38 third-party APIs, with your backends and all sort of things, so that if a user makes a query that requires somebody to look up like 2-3 different places, the chatbot could actually make that query directly and then provide available options to the user, and then the communication can move forward really quickly. But let's face it, there's another reason why we want to build chatbots, especially all of you that join me for this session. And the thing is that it's fun to build one. And this is something that we want to show you today. So Jonathan is still fairly new to building chatbots, but he will show you some of the basics and some of the stuff that you can do. And then later on, I'll take over, and that should be a fun session. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the usual challenges that you might see when using chatbots that are out there. One of them is around fixed decision trees. So what really happens is that you have many chatbots that only understand the conversation to go in very specific steps. And if the user tries to do something in a slightly different order, the chatbot kind of like says like, no, like this is not how I work. Like we have to do it my way, which might not be very, very comfortable. So I'll give you an example. You could have a user that comes up and says, hey, I want to rent a car. And the chatbot, sure, I can help you with that. What country? And if that at this point the user says Paris, like the chatbot knows what Paris is, but they might go like, no, sorry, didn't get that. Like, what country do you have in mind? And then when the person finally says France, and then then the chatbot asks for the city, like the user is not going to be happy. It's like, well, I already gave you the city. Like, why do we have to go through all those steps? So a different way, obviously, of handling is like basically train the chatbot so that it can get the data in the order that the user is comfortable with. So if someone says like, yeah, I want to rent a car, I can help with that. What country? If somebody says Paris, the chatbot should be able to recognize that Paris is in fact in France, and it doesn't need to ask for that question, and then they can move on. And that's pretty cool, because the whole conversation just like progresses really fast and it goes along with what the user is trying to provide. And that's cool. The other thing is around understanding of business entities. So what I mean around like a business entity or entity per se is basically any kind of data that you could potentially be providing. So if we're building, I don't know, like a chatbot for pizza, then obviously entities would be what kind of pizza types we have, or what sizes we have, or what ingredients we have. If we're building one for a hospital, then the chatbot should be aware of all the doctors, nurses, treatments. So the kind of things that the user could say that the chatbot could try to then extract. So here's an example of if the chatbot is not trained with entities around doctors, and if somebody says, hey, I want to book an appointment with Dr. Burke, the chatbot goes like, sure, I can help you book an appointment. What is your doctor's name? And here's where problems start, because the user already said it's Dr. Burke, but they go like, okay, what? And at that point, the chatbot will think that what is in fact a doctor. So say, when would you like to see Dr. What? What is going on? I'm not sure I understand you. Me neither. And this is kind of like all massive confusion, because the chatbot didn't recognize that Dr. Berg was in fact a doctor, and then he was kind of like not even able to recognize that what is not really a doctor's name. It was just kind of like using like a hardcore thing. Like if you said what to my question, then I guess that's the doctor's name. So this all could be solved in a very simple way by training the chatbot with all the records on the doctors that we have. So if somebody says, I want to book an appointment with Dr. Burke, the chatbot should be able to recognize that this is in fact one of the records that he has on the system, and even know that it's not just Dr. Burke, but it's Dr. John Burke. And at that point, you could say like, sure, what time would you like to meet Dr. John Burke? And by just understanding entities, the chatbot can already provide a lot better service and then make things relevant to this specific conversation. The other one is around lack of proper acknowledgements that I saw out there. So it's more of like a scenario where somebody can come to the chatbot and provide a lot of information. So like in this case, someone says, hey, I'd like to sign up for a health insurance for a surfing trip to Vienna from August 22nd to August 30th. So this is a lot of information that this user is providing. And if at this point the chatbot says, okay, what's your age? The user is not going to be feeling very comfortable, and they will just say like, well, I sure you got my info. And this kind of like just again can spiral in the wrong direction. So what we really need to do is keep the user at ease and then tell them what we understood or what the chatbot understood. So obviously with proper acknowledgements, the same conversation should go like this, where the chatbot could say a surfing trip to Vienna is always a good idea. And then you already verifies that the insurance is for surfing trip and it's for Vienna. And then kind of like follow up another one, let's find you an insurance from this date to this date. So this kind of like confirms that it understood all these pieces of information. And then finally, it can then go and ask, what's your age? And then they can go on and then book that health insurance. The other issue that I saw is around dealing with ambiguities. So I always say that, like, especially with English, like it's very easy to say something that is ambiguous, and chatbots can get confused even more when it comes to entities. So especially if somebody comes up and provides more than one entity of the same type, the chatbot could kind of like get confused about it. So you could have a situation where you could say, I talked to Dr. Burke and he told me to book an appointment with Dr. Alcott. Well, to us might be kind of clear in terms of which is the doctor that we should recognize, but the chatbot could get confused and just pick the first one. And at that point, it could say like, hey, sure, would you like to see, when would you like to see Dr. John Burke? And then the user could go like, no, that's not the doctor I have in mind. So obviously, whenever the chatbot is confused about the options, what we should do is employ with a way to handle this, and then kind of like tell it how to deal with ambiguity. So it's a lot better when the chatbot responds will say, sure, can you please verify which of the doctors do you have in mind? So this is a really quick step, because then the user can just click on Dr. Ali Alcott, and then they can move on. And that's a lot faster and a lot better. The other one is issue that I saw is around dealing with long-term memory. So when we deal with chatbots, those are machines. And for some of the information that they provide, if they keep coming back over and over again, and then keep having the same conversation, some of the information should never change or will change very rarely. So the chatbot should be trained to actually memorize some of the options. So in this case, could be somebody coming up and says, hey, I want to book an appointment. And then the chatbot could go like, yeah, sure, I can help you book that appointment. What is your phone number? And if this is a user that keeps coming back every week to book the same appointment over and over again, like what is the likelihood that they would actually change their phone number every time? It's actually very little. So if we keep asking them always for the phone number, A, they might get annoyed. B, they might actually get it like mistype it one of the times, and we won't send them a notification. So obviously, they also can get annoyed and say like, hey, why don't you have it already? So the best thing would be to do in this case is to notify the chatbot which fields it should actually try to remember, so that next time the user comes back, it might actually provide a suggestion. So in this case, it could actually go, hey, absolutely, I can help you book that appointment. Is this still your phone number? So in this case, we're still asking the user to verify, But in this case, it is a very straightforward yes or no answer. And then they can kind of like move on with this conversation really quickly. And if their phone number actually changed this time, they can just say no and give us a new phone number, which I think it's a great way of handling these scenarios. And the last one is basically around the lack of conversation UI, especially when it comes to dealing with like a web-based chatbots. There's a ton of options where we can actually guide the users with additional UI elements in terms of how to actually progress with this conversation. So if somebody comes up and says, "Can you book me an appointment with Dr. Burke on Friday?" The chatbot can respond with, "I understand that you want to meet with Dr. John Burke. What time?" And at first, there doesn't seem to be any issue with this particular conversation, but in reality, it could be more of a hit and miss game, because if somebody says, "Okay, I want to meet that doctor at 12," the chat will go like, "Sorry, Dr. John Burke is busy at 12. What time?" And at that point, the user can go like, "Yeah, this is going to take a while. Sorry, I didn't get that." So what we have to do in this case is, instead of letting the user guess what are the available options, we should provide the available options to them. So this could be done with a query to the backend. Let's get an appointment and then help the user. So they want an appointment with Dr. Berg on Friday. Let's look up the Dr. Berg's availability on that day, and then say, "Hey, yeah, I understand that. Here are the available slots." And at that moment, the user can choose one of the slots. So sure, maybe they wanted at 12, but then they realized that actually they could probably get out of work by 15:30 and then make that appointment. And by just adding a couple of buttons to display available options, we are helping the users to progress really nicely. Okay, so knowing those basic in terms of kind of things that we should be able to build with chatbots, it should be pretty straightforward to build one, right? Well, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story how we got in the business of building chatbots. So a few years back, we had a hackathon at Progress, and one of the teams we wanted to build this chatbot that will let you book a meeting room. And it was a pretty straightforward thing, because the idea was, okay, so to book a meeting room, we need to say in which of the offices, how many people should be attending, and which people probably, and whether we need like any video equipment, or whether we want like any food or anything like that. And we were kind of like excited. The idea was pretty straightforward. So like this was us like super pumped. Like, we have 48 hours. We can definitely build something that's fun. And we basically came up with this logical design when we started this project. And that was actually our first realization that trying to do it in like a classical way may not necessarily go in like according to the plan, or may not be as easy as we thought using like classical languages, which we actually tried to do it purely in JavaScript. And our project really went like more or less like this, where we were like, well, what's going on? This is not working out. The project is actually falling apart. And we eventually just built something that was about 10% of what we intended to do. And I always say that it's not about actually the failures and mistakes that you make, especially when it comes to like hackathons like that, but it's more about the conclusions that you make after such project. And we basically realized that using pure JavaScript was not the way to build a chatbot, and we needed something that was slightly different. And based on that, we actually came up with this idea, which now we call NativeChat. So it's an AI-powered platform for building chatbots. But one of the most important things, in my opinion, for NativeChat is the fact that we use declarative programming to create our chatbots. So there's no if, else, or switch statements, but it's more about telling the chatbot that if there is a conversation, in order to complete it, we might need somebody's email address, or we may want to get their date of birth, or know which pizza they want to order. And then the chatbot handles this conversation for us, which is really cool. And we also using JSON to construct such conversation. So if we wanted to create a conversation step, let's say we want to ask a user a question, and the question will be around the country. So we'll ask them which country they want to get something from, and we can also train our chatbot that the country values are France, Germany, Italy, and Poland. So whenever somebody says any of these words, then the chat will automatically know that this is one of the countries that we accept. And then we can also provide like a message prompt. So which country are you traveling to? And then finally, with a little display that we call quick reply, we can tell the chatbot that we should provide the list of available countries as buttons to the user. And with just this little code, we should have a conversation that goes more or less like this, where you can say, I want to order a car. We get available list of countries, and the user was able to very quickly click on that, so quickly that it actually disappeared within a moment. But that's basically the idea. It's like very little code, and the chatbot already can handle this conversation and the flow for us. The other thing really cool about NativeChat is that you can write one code and you can deploy to different platforms. So obviously, the first one is that you can deploy chatbots to a web platform. So it could be pretty much any of your websites, and it could be written in vanilla JavaScript, it could be Ruby based, it could be Angular, React, pretty much anything that you write in, or even if it's a CMS, you could add NativeChat in there. There's also a voice version of the chatbot. So we have an extension that works with Amazon Alexa. And if you're after building chatbots for mobile, then NativeChat supports also Facebook Messenger, Viber, WhatsApp, and SMS, which we might be able to show you a little bit how they work in a moment. Cool. So I think it's time to do some live coding demo. So I will show you how to actually build such chatbot. So I am going to pass on the microphone now to Jonathan. And Jonathan will start the project and kind of like show you some of the basics. And the idea is that I'll be here as well, and I'll be guiding Jonathan through the process. So I think Jonathan, you're there.
Hey Sebastian.
Hey,
so excited.
Welcome to this.
Thank you. So what are we building today?
I think we should build a chatbot for renting a car. Which is kind of like our tutorial. So I think the idea will be that I will kind of guide you through some of the steps just to show how simple it is to actually get started. Okay, so I'm going to give you the control. So I'll make you the presenter. Did I make you presenter? Yeah. And you should be able to share your screen anytime now.
Yes. All right.
I thought I was talking, but I was muted. Sorry. Yeah, so this is our platform for building chatbots. So if you want to test it out, you can simply just go to bostonnativechat.com and create a free account and then start playing. So once you create, so we already have a shared project that both Jonathan and I can edit. But once you create a project, you arrive to this site. And from the dashboard, you can go to different parts. And I think for today, we'll mostly focus on question answering and guided conversations. So one of the easiest things that we can really do first is train our chatbots to answer like straight up questions. So if this is a chatbot for car rental, Jonathan, maybe you can go to question answering.
All right.
And we could from here train our chatbot to answer some questions. So first we should create like a new category. So because our question answers could be grouped in different categories. We could just call this one general Q&A, or just general. So you could give it a name. Yeah. All right, and let's create a category. And now we can start adding questions. So maybe a question could be something like, what insurance, or maybe, do you have any ideas? Like, yeah, what type of insurance do you offer? Is that a good one?
Yeah, sure.
What is the, yeah, or yeah, what type of insurance do you offer? And then, so the group name is more of like an ID. So we could call it like insurance types. And the answer is basically the text that will be displayed to the user once this question is recognized. So maybe we could say something, we offer basic and comprehensive policies, or something like that. Cool. And if you just save changes, that's basically what we need to do to train the chatbot to actually answer that one specific question. Maybe we can add one more that could basically say something like, can I book a car online? And maybe, yeah, we could call this book online. And the answer could be like, sure, you can book the car online or come to our office. Oh, yes, definitely, that works too. Yeah, right. Perfect. And obviously we can like provide more than one answer. We could also provide more than one way of asking this question. But now on the right hand side, this is like our test window where where we can test how our chatbot works so far. So Jonathan, you can ask like, can I book car online or something like that? Yeah, and that basically would respond. You might need to reload the page, because sometimes when you keep the page open for a while, like this test window could go to sleep. So if you just reload, I think that would do the trick. That usually happens when you're just preparing for webinar and having all the windows clean.
Yes,
so
that happens.
Let's try again.
Oh yes.
And the chatbot responds with the answer. And obviously, you don't always have to write the answer in the exact same way. And the general idea is to actually go on and have like more than one way of asking the same similar question. And we usually should kind of like focus on things like book and online and a question mark that should kind of be there. And then various other ways of asking this. So yeah, just book car, like, yeah, that wouldn't necessarily work. But the idea is that, and that could be like a whole different session to talk about just the natural language processing. But in general, we should be training our chatbots to kind of like handle different ways of asking the same questions. So that's one way that we can use our chatbots. The other way is where we could actually train it to follow a conversation. So it's more about like a step-by-step. So Jonathan, if you go to the cognitive flow tab.
All right.
Well, so in here, maybe you can make it slightly bigger, just like do Command plus. Yeah, or zooming in kind of works. Okay, so the general idea is that out of the box, we already have like a welcome conversation, a help conversation, etc., etc. So in here in the conversation, this is like the JSON where we construct all our conversations. We can create a new one, which we can call rent car. So if you go to create a new line now, So it's actually not a step. So maybe delete this. Yeah, so, oops, one too many. That was, yeah. So go to a new line, because that's usually like the best thing. So what you need to do is, oh, just for everybody's reference, we are using Monaco editor for building the chatbot. So it actually comes with quite a lot of advanced features, like we can have code snippets and live errors, syntax errors displayed to us, etc., etc. So to create a conversation, all you have to do is just type like CON and then press enter, and that generates like a conversation snippet, and maybe change the conversation name to just rent-car. Perfect. And the only thing that we need is add a comma just at the end of this code snippet, since this is JSON, so that should work. And just to test that our conversation works, inside steps, this is where we can provide all the steps that are required to complete this conversation. So if you just go to a new line, in this case, we could just display a simple message. So maybe you can start typing STE for steps, and you can see like these are all the available types of steps, and we could go for the step message. Just to do something. So we could say hello from rent car. Or rent a car, that works too. Perfect. So what we need to do next is actually train our chatbot when to trigger this conversation. So if you just copy the string that is in line 3, the rent-car, I know it's easy to type, but I find it easier to kind of always copy so that there are no mistyped entries. So you can go to training. Yeah.
Okay.
And then from conversation triggers, we can train the chatbot when to trigger this conversation, right? So if you add a new one, now you can paste the text you had. So we want to trigger this conversation when somebody says rent car, or we could say something like book a car, or just say book car, because things like EA and DEAN, like those are not really necessary because the chatbot will still be able to understand it. And maybe you could add I want car. Perfect. So you could save that. And we could already test it again in the window on the right-hand side. So I think that got saved. So you could say, I want to rent a car, or I would like to book a car. We can try both. And we can see that the chatbot actually responds with the text that we train it to. You could even say like, I would like to book a car. And so that's kind of like the idea. Like we train it on like the simple triggers, but like then the chatbot can actually understand it from a full conversation. So how do you like it so far?
Pretty good. So this basically means that even though I train it for just 3 phrases, my chatbot is going to pick up various other phrases which are related to this 3 phases, right?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that the way NLP will work, if you look at these 3 expressions, it sees that car appears 3 times. So it kind of like automatically car becomes very important to this specific trigger. So then anytime in the conversation, there's in a sentence like there's a car and then also a word like rent, book, or want, automatically the chatbot will kind of go like, oh, wait a minute, like I think it's going to be this conversation. This becomes a lot more important when you have more than one conversation trigger, or like more than one conversation that you want to trigger, especially like you have 10 or 20 or something. Then suddenly there's all this mechanism on kind of like what constitutes like an important token to recognize a conversation. But let's make this more fun. So what we can do is you can go back to the cognitive flow, and we're going to change this conversation. So let's get rid of that step that we have so far for the for the message, that's not really helpful. Yeah, you can click there to kind of highlight it and remove it. Perfect. So we're gonna ask user a question for the name. So if you type STQ and press enter, that will generate the code necessary for the question. So I'll explain what each of those bits are. So entity is like a name of a variable. So this is basically for us how we want to call it. So maybe you could call it name. And it's advised that those should be like a lowercase. Oops. Yeah, name. And entity type is basically just a type of what the data we're looking for. So this is going to be text with capital T. So any text will do. And then the message is basically the message prompt that will display to the user. So we could ask them like, what is your name? Cool. So let's save this. And now we can go back to the conversation. So you could just say, rent a car.
Rent a car.
And you ask for your name.
It's asking me my name.
So
John Doe.
John Doe. And yeah, nothing really happens. So what we can do is, if there's also a debug thing, because basically the chatbot understood your name, but it doesn't have any more steps to follow. So what we have here in debug, we can actually show what the chatbot understood. So if you expand on the understanding that is like on the bottom one, yeah, you can show this one and this one. So in the first case, it kind of understood with 83% that somebody wanted the rent car conversation. And then the next one is basically when you said John, it understood that that's a name and the value is John. And basically that's the full magic. Okay, cool. So what we should probably do next is probably train our chatbots about some of the entities. So our services should be available in like various countries. So just like I was doing in the presentation. So what we can do is go to training.
Right.
And there should be an entity segment.
There it is.
There it is. And if you add a new entity, there's different ways of constructing an entity. But so first thing we have to do is give it a name. So let's call it country, and then do it with a capital C. Perfect.
Okay.
And so we could train a chatbot based on like a keyword or a trait that is like depending on how it looks next to like within a sentence or regular expression. But we're gonna be using just keywords for now. And then training data source, we basically, if we choose static, that means that we'll manually enter all the fields, and dynamic is if we want to load it from a web service. So let's do it statically first.
Okay.
So if you press create, that will create our country entity. And then you can press add new. And in this case, we're basically providing new values. So we'll have countries like Germany. So that was one of them. And save changes. Then we can add Italy. Yep. Then we'll have France and Poland. And just for your information, there's also this bit with synonyms. If you were, for example, to say something like Polska, which is Polska. Yeah, that's basically could be like the Polish spelling of like Poland, right? So if you save that, that means that the chatbot will understand that when you say Poland or Polska, it will know that you're referring to the Poland entity. And we could very quickly test already this entity. If you go on the right-hand side in the test window, there's understanding segment. Yep. And in here we can write whatever phrases. So you could say, I don't know, like I like Italy, but Polska is okay too.
Let's try Polska.
Yeah,
Sounds
and
interesting.
then
Oh,
so
it says it's
yeah. So you can see that Polska was recognized as a country, and Poland was the actual record. So it's not that you will remember it as Polska, you will remember it as Poland, but you can recognize that.
That's nice.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So what we should do next is create a question where we ask the user for the country where they want to rent a car. So yeah, at the end of this, the previous step, add a comma. So maybe, no, not here. After the curly bracket, yes. So add a comma, go to new line. And you could do again STQ for the code snippet for question. Yep, this one. So we could call it country with the lowercase c. You don't have to highlight, it's already highlighted actually. Yeah, and tab. So hit the tab key. And now the entity type is country with capital C, exactly. So then the chatbot should be able to understand this. And the question could be, which country are you traveling from, maybe? Cool.
All right.
So if you save this, we should be able, and then go back to the test window, you need to go back to the flow. You should be able to now do rent a car. And yeah, it's like, what's your name? John. And here's the funny thing. If you were to say one of the countries that is not on the list, so if you say Portugal or any other, yeah, like the chat will not understand, like it will refuse it. It was like, actually didn't get it, which country you're traveling to. But if you say now like Polska or whichever, or France, yeah, then the chat will be happy with that and then kind of like say, okay, I'm good with that. The problem here is that we are not displaying available options to the user. So it's kind of a guessing game because like, yeah, they may want to go from Portugal, but Portugal is not on the list. So they should be able to very quickly decide that like, oh yeah, this is not a service for me. Or
so Sebastian, is there a way wherein you can display all of these options?
Yes. So if we can add, just like I was showing the slides, in the questions tab after messages, or it could be anywhere, if you add a comma after the square bracket in line 20 and go to new line. So maybe, yeah, go back. Sometimes this appears. All right, go to new line and then start typing display. Yeah, presenter, type. So, yep. And then you can start typing quick. So remove actually the double quotes. Yeah, so this, yeah, and presenter. That basically is how we tell the chatbot that we want to display available countries. One other thing before we move on, I want to show two things in one go. Because we already have the name of the user in line 19 at the beginning of the string, we could say something like okay. So just say okay before which. Or yeah, hello. So what we can do now is you can do like we call it the double handlebar. So you can do the open curly brackets exactly, and you could say inside name, just like the name of the entity in line 8. And basically that will use interpolation to inject the actual name value into the sentence. So if you save this, we should be able to test our conversation very quickly.
Rent a car. My name is John Doe. Oh, look at this. I like the way it's personalizing the chat. Now it actually feels like there is a human talking to me.
There you go. Yeah. And he knows that you're John. So yeah, and you can also choose one of the countries from the list, and that works pretty nicely. Okay, so let's add another entry where we will ask the user for like the city in which they want to travel. So I shared with you before the session also like some like endpoint and like authorization keys, so we can reuse that. So if you go to a training, and let's add a new session. Sorry, new entity. So let's call it city. And in this case, we choose dynamic. So what we have to do is for the endpoint, you have to paste the URL that I shared with you. And basically in the headers, we need to add the authorization and the actual key that we have.
All right, yeah, add that in. And here's my key.
Yep. So the whole thing is that from here, where we have the value template, this is how we tell which of the fields from that endpoint that we should be training on. So again, we could use double handlebar and just say inside name. And then if you press create,
Wow.
that basically train the chatbot. So all the entity values that came from that endpoint are like, Berlin, Krakow, Gdańsk, etc., etc. So yeah, let's try to put that in action. So just add a new step, and I think you know how to do it this time.
Yes,
So
let me try it.
need to come up, not this one, the next one, actually.
Oh. Oops.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing sometimes with JSON knowing. So that should be step question. Yeah.
We are going to call this city.
Yeah, let's call it city.
And the entity type is going to be city with a capital T.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to say, which city are you traveling to?
Actually, that would be still from, because that's like the country and city. Are you traveling from? Yeah, because you choose the country, then the city.
Yes.
Okay, and you could also add the display part.
Okay. Wow, this is really quick.
Yeah, once you know what you're doing, and I don't say anything, like you can do it even faster than me. Tell you. So let's test that.
All right, let's test it out and see how it goes. For me, I am your favorite John Doe. So let's say we are coming from Germany. Oh, so now it gives me options of cities as well.
Yeah,
And
but the
this are all
problem is
fetched
that you're
from the web
getting
storage,
all
right?
the cities, right?
Nice.
Cool. So one thing I think that it might be worth showing, and I can actually explain you how that works, is around acknowledgements, because you could also say something, rent a car in France.
Okay.
Let's try that. Yeah.
Sure.
So you can basically just type it as a test in the test window, rent a car in France. And yeah, the chat will ask you for the name. Yeah, you could just say John. And you see, it jumps straight up to the city.
Nice.
But what it should probably do is let you know that it understood in the first place that that you said France for the country. So what you can do is basically in the country step after the display, add a comma there, and we need to add reactions. So you could type reactions, presenter, and then acknowledgements. So yeah, and then as a string, again, you could give a message like, so add a string and say, sure, we have cars in. And then using a double handlebar, yep, you can say country with the lowercase c and save this.
Wow, this is really going to personalize the entire experience.
Yeah, so now if you say rent a car in Germany, the chatbot will give you the acknowledgement that kind of like he understood that part. So there was a part where when it came to the chatbot not exactly understanding like that we already chose the country and showing all the available cities. So what I can probably do is take over and then probably show how to kind of like do some additional stuff with the chatbot. So this was pretty great. And then like I'll basically take the control for now.
Wow, this
So
was
show my screen.
And
Yeah,
thanks for
how does
letting
it
me
feel?
try it out. I really enjoyed it. It was fun.
Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So so I basically I will continue with your session. So I want to show everyone how to actually display the countries in like that are just specifically for the country that we want. So I will bring up Postman. So basically, if I make a query for our offices, so I'm going to reuse the same API, and then I pass like query equals and then country and then pass the name of the country, then I can actually bring back just the countries that are relevant to Germany. So we will try to do that. And at the same time, I'm going to show you other ways of displaying records. So for example, we have single select, which is like a list. And then I have to kind of like retrain this step for the data source. So the endpoint is going to be that whole thing. We need to escape the quotes. Perfect. And instead of, let's do this. And instead of Germany, I'm just going to do country in double handlebar. So you see, like just doing this, I'm kind of like telling the chatbot that I want to make this query using an pre-existing field. And the method by default is get anyway. I didn't have to do that exactly, but it's good to add that. So the headers, so I'm going to use the headers we had. So that's our header. So our data source is configured. Next thing is we need a template. So in this case, we need to kind of say title is name. So we want to display name. And maybe for subtitle, what fields did we have here? Yeah, we could display country as a subtitle. So subtitle, oops, country, I didn't copy it. We could add image, but nah, let's skip that step. And then we just need a couple of things. So title is like a name for the button to kind of show cities. And then next one could be is a button text. So kind of like select this city. And let's try that. So rent a car in France. Sure, my name is Sebastian. If I could type. So which cities, and in this case, we just get the cities for the country I chose. Actually, I could say show Polska. So even during the conversation, I was able to change the intent of what I wanted to do. And now we can choose cities from here. So that's basically like the idea. The other thing I want to show you is I have one more endpoint for training a chatbot on the available cars. So let's try to do that. So I will just do it very quickly because I want to show you how actually Carousel works, because that is pretty cool. So I'm going to use this endpoint. The key headers is authorization. Value is this. And like we can see that basically we can use name and short name as the alias, and and the main value. So I'm gonna do name and short name, so we can train the chatbot on 2 of those fields. And let's create that. And then after this, I would like to show all of you how to, that didn't work. Oh, because there is a square bracket by mistake. Let's try again. Yes, retrain the chatbot. There you go. Now you should be able to understand that if I say Ford car, that's actually a car. All right. So very quickly then, I can potentially do it this way. So step question. So we were going to ask for a car. Which car would you like? Display type carousel. So one more time, I'm actually going to use data source. So I will basically copy all of this just to save time and just change the relevant bits. So we need to kind of like ask again for the available cars, and technically we could have even add a query to display just the cars that are in that city, but conscious of time, we can probably skip that. So each car, where is Postman, will have like the name, and also we could display a price. So I am actually going to copy existing text. So title is name, and then price is going to be, so we are even using this helper for price to display everything in US dollars. So I can say show cars in case Carousel is not available, select car. And I think that should do the trick. So rent a car, Sebastian, Italy, yeah, Rome's fine. And this displays like all the cars as a carousel. We could actually, oh yes, let's add an image, because now the carousel will really show the like how it works. So we have this image URL property. So I can do this. Let's try one more time. Rent a car, Seba, France, Paris. Could even do some validation, and now we can have a carousel that actually displays like all the cars like in a nice way, and I can say, okay, I want this Mazda MX-5, and basically that's how you go about building a chatbot. So what I want to do next is actually, because obviously there's quite a few more steps that we could do. There's even validations. We could ask for date, display calendars, and all sort of things like that. But what I want to do now is just to show you very quickly how you can go about publishing this chatbot. So I want to deploy this chatbot to a website. So what I can do is go to publishing, and this generates 2 scripts. One, it could be as a frame that is as part of a div, or another one, it could be like just a small icon. So I'm going to copy this, and I will bring up, I have this project that is done in StackBlitz. And what I have to do is just go to the index.html, and I want to actually, this is an Angular application, so I want to display this chatbot to be available on all pages. So I'm going to add it to index.html and then just paste that script that I got from there. We don't need the Google API key. And the other thing is that this should probably go to the header. Okay, so once I save this, our website has now this little icon popping up here, and I can click here, and that should slowly load it. And I can say, hi, I want to rent a car. What's your name? Sebastian. France, show cities, Lyon, and I could choose Kia Sorento, etc., etc. And basically, that's the main magic of like building chatbots. We could also test the same chatbot in like other platforms. So now I want to come back to the project. We could publish it to Facebook Messenger. So I'm not going to actually do the publishing, but just to show you how this works. So I could do and go and say I want to test it in Messenger. So all I need here is use that proxy. So I'm just going to open the page and just for now hide my conversations just very quickly. So bear with me for a second. There we are. So this is my Facebook account. So from here, I can paste this proxy, and this should start our conversation. And I could say, rent a car. What's my name? Sebastian. You could technically actually recognize that this is Facebook and get the name from the user. But in this case, I'm just gonna use like the flow we had. So show cities. We could display the available cities in here. Let's go with Rome. And we could also even have like little flags and other things. And here are the cars. So I think I want a nice car. Yeah, let's go with Mercedes. Jonathan's paying. And kind of like this is how you could use the same chatbot in Facebook Messenger. We could do Twilio and some other ones, but I think we're running out of time. Could we tell a user that country doesn't exist and go back to the country list, etc.? So yeah, actually, that's basically what we can do. So, and that's kind of like what the conversation will do. So when I say rent a car, and like I say Seba, and then if I say USA, the chatbot will actually say like, yeah, he didn't understand, he didn't get it, what you wanted to say. But if you say I want, and this is a cool thing, I am traveling from France, the chatbot will actually extract France from this whole sentence and then kind of like move on. We could also do some other things, and I don't think we have exactly time right now for this. But if I say right now Rome, like this will still work, even though somebody said France. So we could actually, that takes a bit more effort, but technically we could add reactions, validations, and then we could do like a custom validation, and then in here, or not even custom, webhook validation. So we could make a call to our, let's say, offices, and then just make sure that the selected country is the same as the available ones in the city. Sorry, the selected city is available in the country, and that would work too. And that the same thing can apply to, I don't know, like you have a basket, and then somebody is trying to change the values, and then you could every time validate, or maybe there's just 3 tickets left, and then somebody said 7. You could actually say, no, you cannot book that many tickets, and that's kind of like the idea. Cool. One other thing, so I don't think I can show you now. Maybe we can do another webinar where I can do one specifically for Alexa. But what we can also do is, if I was to deploy to Alexa, it takes about 5 minutes to set it up. When we have messages, we can also do SSML messages, and this is something Alexa would say. And the cool thing is that, let's see if I can Google it, Amazon Alexa SSML syntax, was it? This might be the one. So we could even like say something like add something like this, that like say as cardinal. So that basically means that the chatbot, instead of saying 12,345, it could say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you could use like audio. So I was using that once when I was like building a chatbot for like that could check your voicemail messages. You could use something like emphasis. So we could kind of say something, and this is really cool, where let's do this. Which city are you traveling from? Yeah, let's escape this. And then this is really cool, because then if this was Alexa, the Alexa skill would say, which city are you traveling from? So it kind of like can put emphasis and all sort of things, which is pretty awesome. Okay, I am going to go back to the presentation, and I want to show you a couple of things. So if you like what you saw, but you still kind of doubting whether you could get yourself started, or you maybe think that you need some assistance to help with your organization to implement the chatbot, we have a thing called the NativeChat pilot program, and kind of works in 3 phases, and it's also free of charge. So it's really, really cool, because we can give you some of our time for free. And then in exchange for kind of like some feedback, and then also is a great opportunity to learn more about NativeChat. So the way it works is you can go to the URL that you can see below, and it works in 3 phases. So first we start with requirements gathering, and basically then we move on to the second phase, where we actually go and implement the chatbot with you, and then we just have a sign off. So with the first phase, we start by working with you, and we prepare a conversational flow. So this is kind of like the conversation that I was building just a moment ago together with Jonathan, where you have like this step-by-step conversation. So we would design which conversation it is that we should be building. Next, we would look at different Q&As. So we would probably work with one of your subject matter experts to prepare like 10 to 20 Q&As, and then we'll train you on how to actually use it. We'd also spend some time to pick the right deployment target. So we could choose whether you want an Alexa chatbot or WhatsApp chatbot or web chatbot. Usually we try to focus on just one in the pilot program, but it's definitely possible to do multiple at the same time. And we'll kind of like agree on the acceptance criteria in terms of what would constitute a successful project. And then finally, we would compile a pilot flow agreement document, which both parties would sign. And then the implementation itself is like, oops, I went back by mistake. And the implementation is more or less works like this, where we would give you a full day training on working with NativeChat, then spend about 2 days of pair programming. And they can be, for example, for half a days as well. That's perfectly fine. Would also spend about half a day helping you with the Q&As. It's really that simple to do it, but there's some caveats and interesting things, especially around natural language processing, that we could share with you. And then we would help you and spend about 1 full day to do the deployment. And usually doesn't take much more than half a day, to be honest, but we'd definitely put aside like a day to do it. And then you would end up with a complete chatbot that would be ready to use. And then with the sign off, we would probably work with you to do a demo to one of your internal stakeholders. Would plan next steps and look for the future stuff. We would look for you to give us some feedback, because that's how we keep working and implementing new features and providing new ideas. And that's how the pilot program would conclude. And then hopefully from then on, you would want more. That's basically also the idea. So if you like the idea of what we're showing, definitely you should go to this URL. And don't worry if you can't capture it just now. We'll also share the link, all the links to this page later on. So yeah, thank you for listening to us. What do you think? Isn't that cool? I think this is pretty cool. So where do you go next? So you can check out our website for NativeChat, the areas where we're working, the development program, and the docs if you want to see more documentation, the tutorial. Like if you want to continue with the car rental idea, you could go to bit.ly/NativeChat tutorial. We also have a WhatsApp tutorial that is completely separate and is more about like a taxi hailing application or chatbot. There's also an SMS version of it. And the demo that I was showing, you could actually play with this demo. So you could probably go to this link where I published the chatbot we're working on. So I'll give you some time to maybe copy the links. And if you have any questions, now will be a good time to ask questions, and I'll be happy to answer any of them. And if not, it's an important announcement. No electric sheep were hurt in the making of this presentation. And thank you for listening.